Okay, here is the video lecture for Urban Sociology, West Virginia State University, for urban social class structure. This will accompany the video that I sent you guys on just social class in general and social stratification. So you'll want to write down notes. I gave you this PowerPoint shell in class Wednesday the 19th. So some of this you're going to have, like the first several pages of this you're going to have. And then you're going to see some obvious spots where you'll need to fill in some things. But I kind of want to go through this. And I know we talked a little bit in class the other day about social stratification. Again, it's the hierarchical ranking within a society of various social class groups according to wealth, power, and prestige. We talked about in class about social stratification really being structured inequality. There's a very systematic way in which each society goes about structuring its inequality, and strata literally translates to layer, and we talked about that when we looked at the different, like the trees that have been cut in half. You could see the rings in the tree, and the rocks you could see the different layers as well. Now, socioeconomic status, this is a composite ranking based upon various dimensions of social inequality, also referred to as SES. Socioeconomic status comes from our status symbols, or the number of status symbols one possesses, how nice one's things are, or the value or expensiveness of clothes, vacations, cars, etc. So as you can kind of see, the more status you have, the higher your socioeconomic status, the nicer your things. Your clothes, your cars, your homes. Social class, we're talking about a large group of people who rank pretty closely to one another in terms of wealth, power, and prestige. Power, we're talking about the ability to carry out your will, even over the resistance of others. Social prestige or status is respect or regard. So again, the higher up you are in the class structure, the more power, the more wealth, the more prestige generally you have, and vice versa. The lower you are in the social class system, the less power, lower amounts or less amounts of wealth, lower amounts of status or prestige. Now, the manifestations of social stratification are in the U.S. are found within cities. We can see it also within the suburbs, and we can also see it within non-urban areas or rural areas. The coexistence of great wealth and great poverty can be found in cities in the U.S. and really everywhere, not just in cities. A social class appears to be even more significant than race or ethnicity in suburban settlement patterns, as more African Americans, Asians, and Latinos are moving into newer suburbs. Incomes within and outside of cities. Research shows that those living outside of central cities are better off than those living within central cities. This comes from the U.S. Census Bureau. In 2003, median incomes were the following. Inside U.S. central cities, $34,174. Inside U.S. suburbs, $51,737. In the United States, in rural areas, it goes down again. We're down to a median income of $36,112. So why, you might ask, why greater incomes in U.S. suburbs? Well, several reasons, and some of those we've already kind of talked about in class. There are greater financial resources in suburbs. A lot of central cities have experienced infrastructure decay. Businesses and industries have moved out into the suburbs, and when that happens, they take with them people and jobs, and resources tend to follow. Often what is left behind in U.S. central cities are densely populated minorities with high crime rates, high poverty rates. So you can kind of see that we can start talking about some of those differences. Poverty within and outside of cities. Research shows that there's a greater strain placed on cities' resources to assist those living at or below the poverty level. So again, as people are moving away and have been moving away from central cities, businesses, industries kind of going with them, it's leaving behind fewer people, but they still have to pay for infrastructure, and there still needs to be money to maintain those cities. So that creates more of a strain, and it creates more poverty. In 2003, this comes from the U.S. Census Bureau data, inside U.S. central cities you find the greatest amount of poverty. 1 in 6 people live at the poverty level or below. In the suburbs, it's only 1 in 11, 9.1%. And then when you move to the rural areas, it spikes up again. It's 14.2%, or 1 in 7. So why is there more poverty in central cities inside the U.S.? Limited economic opportunities. Jobs moving away. There just aren't the opportunities. People who are poor don't have the means to just get up and move out, so they end up being stuck, literally, in these central cities, stuck in poverty, stuck in these high crime areas. Greater number of foreign-born residents in cities as well. Cities are home to many poor newcomers struggling to survive. When foreign people generally migrate to the United States, they generally end up in cities, in center cities, or like New York, for example. More than 2/5 of foreign-born, or 44% of people, live in a central city. So, again, stands to reason if you've got people from different parts of the world, different languages, from a different culture, different country, it can be very difficult for them to make it financially, at least initially, if at all. So this starts to explain and helps to explain poverty in central cities. Urban class social diversity. We can divide urban social class into 5 different categories. We could talk about upper urban class neighborhoods, middle class urban neighborhoods, working class urban neighborhoods, mixed income, and low income urban class neighborhoods. And what we'll do is we'll kind of take these one at a time here. So that's where we're heading now. We'll start with upper urban class neighborhoods. Typically have several homes and alternate where they live at different times. So this is the top of the urban social class ladder, if you will. They may live in luxury apartments or penthouses. Transportation, generally these folks aren't driving themselves a lot. It is likely door-to-door limo service. Must be nice. That would be kind of neat, wouldn't it? So, and the book gives you some examples of. Here's some images, but the book will give you some examples of specific urban areas. I have selected 1 or 2 with each division of social class here that we're talking about. The Nob Hill area in San Francisco, California, represents an example of upper urban class neighborhood. We move down the ladder a step. Middle class urban neighborhoods. Most people here live in suburbia, not really in the central city. Here we talk about yuppies, young urban professionals, dinks, and these terms are in your book as well in Chapter 7. Dual income, no kids, buppies, black urban professionals. So we're seeing young urban professionals, single people often maybe out of college or graduate school who are working. They're focusing on career and income. The dual income, no kids. You have people who are cohabitating or perhaps even married, and they're both working and making pretty good money, and they have no kids. If you have no children, you have more disposable income, and you could live in a middle-class urban neighborhood. Buppies. We're also seeing an explosion of minorities, especially African Americans, into the middle-class structure in this country, and we've talked about that. And we're seeing black urban professionals as well into the middle-class structure in urban America. So an example of this might be Westtown in Chicago, Illinois. And then we move down one more step to working-class urban neighborhoods. These are distinctive by ethnic and racial minority groups who tend to dominate these areas. Many visual clues offer a real distinctive sense of place and help form a sense of community, almost like a small town feel within an urban setting, including churches, clubs, street corners, stores. So you get a real sense of community in these areas. And an example would be East Ward in Newark, New Jersey. Then we have mixed income urban neighborhoods. These are urban areas containing a mixture of income levels due to public housing designed to lessen the concentration of poverty, and also the non-planned result of people moving. So here you have the juxtaposition of people who are making good incomes and people who are, quite frankly, poor. And you can see this pretty close together. And the example that I've given you specifically here would be Grand Rapids, Michigan, where you can see poor areas and you can also see very nice areas where people are making probably higher incomes. Pretty close together. Then you have low-income neighborhoods, low-income urban neighborhoods. These are urban neighborhoods with higher levels of poverty in a city's oldest districts. Many were once middle or even upper-class neighborhoods but have fallen upon hard times, often referred to as ghettos or slums. You've probably heard these terms before. So there's an image. An example that I've selected, I think your book also uses this as an example, Pico Union in Los Angeles, California. Okay, now we're moving specifically into suburban social class diversity. We're not just talking about urban overall, we're talking about suburban social class diversity. And we can divide this several ways, 5 different divisions, and we'll start with upper income suburban neighborhoods. Here families have larger homes on larger properties, perhaps swimming pools, golf and tennis, etc., etc. The populations here tend to be more homogeneous, older, white, highly educated, income significantly above the state average. Now, they'll generally accept anyone. You don't have to be white or of a certain background. If you have the right size bank account, then you're probably going to be accepted. The example I have here is Grosse Pointe Shores, which is a suburb of Detroit, Michigan. Middle-income suburban neighborhoods. Here, few people are poor. Almost all have finished high school. In these areas, middle-income suburban neighborhoods have become more racially mixed in recent years. An example would be Salon, Ohio. Working-class suburban neighborhoods. These multiplied rapidly after the Second World War, and many are suffering now due to the loss of industrial jobs because factories have closed or they've even moved overseas. So that's creating it's creating some problems for these neighborhoods because those jobs are gone. Many of these neighborhoods are deteriorating physically. Property taxes are increasing because as the number of people decrease, you have to raise property taxes and other fees to maintain an acceptable level of income, or rather an acceptable level of funds to maintain those cities with less people. Now some suburban neighborhoods, working class suburban neighborhoods, are still healthy and thriving. An example would be North Olmsted in Cleveland, Ohio. A couple of images there. Next we have suburban cosmopolitan centers. These are mainly composed of academics, professors, actors, artists, writers, students, and they're often located in university areas. People here tend to be very interested in what is called high culture. Princeton, New Jersey was the first example that came into my mind, and that might be the example that your book looks at too. Then we have minority suburbs, mostly located in metropolitan areas of 500,000 people or more. These areas are dominated by specific minorities. You could look at parts of Miami, Florida, where you have a large Latin American concentration. You could also look at parts of Atlanta, Georgia. This is a minority suburb in Atlanta that's largely African American. And we're going to go ahead and call that. Hopefully you've taken some good notes on that. And you obviously are able to stop and pause this as you have needed to write down notes. And that's going to be the end of the video lecture for this part. Thank you.